Hello, and welcome to another episode of On the Origin of Everything, the podcast that dives into the origins of all sorts of things. I'm your host, Danny Payne, and today I'm going to be talking about birthdays. A celebration for having lived another year of life seemed to me like something humans had done since the very beginning, right? I mean, everyone that has ever existed has had a day of birth, so I figured birthdays would have been a part of our history for basically forever. But celebrating a personal birthday is a pretty modern practice, actually. And what's with the cake and the candles? Where did the birthday song come from? We're going to get into all of that today. Let's get started. You can't have a birthday if you don't know what day of the year it is, so a prerequisite to birthdays is having a reliable calendar. If you listen to our episode on timekeeping, you'll recall that for millennia, ancient cultures tracked time using the sun, the moon, and the changing seasons, and it wasn't until 45 BCE that we got a fairly accurate and reliable calendar, the Julian calendar. So, did the Julian calendar bring about birthdays? No, not really. Because in order to have birthdays, you also have to have good record keeping of births. And for most of human history, no civilization was keeping records on every person that was being born. Also, a person's age matters a lot now. Age indicates when you start school, when you can drive a car, when you can vote, etc. But that's not how it has always been. According to sociologists, age tracking is important only in bureaucratic societies for purposes of taxation, military service, schooling, and matters such as inheritances. A person's age in ancient times was not as significant, so celebrating birthdays was simply not a thing. Well, not for the average person anyway. Before modernity, yearly birth celebrations on specific dates did exist, but only to honor gods, kings, emperors, or someone worthy of record, not a regular person. Birthdays, or the ritual that resembled a birthday, began with divine beings, or the earthly elite. For example, the ancient Egyptians celebrated the pharaoh's birth into divinity, not his biological birth. It was a political, religious ritual, an anniversary of his coronation, rather than, "You're 1 year older, Pharaoh, happy birthday." The ancient Greeks celebrated the birth of their gods with big festivals. The birth celebration of the moon goddess Artemis, for instance, is particularly interesting because archaeologists have found evidence that part of the tradition involved offering round cakes and placing them on her altars. Some scholars speculate that some cakes might have had lit candles on them. It has been proposed that the round shape of the cake and the light from the candles were symbolic of the bright, round moon. It makes sense considering it was in honor of the moon goddess. This cake tradition is often cited as the precursor to the modern birthday cake. But remember, this practice was to honor deity, not people like you and me. It was the ancient Romans that first started celebrating the birthdays of regular people. And by regular, I just mean mortals. Rome seems to be the first culture to extend birthday celebrations beyond gods to wealthy, powerful men. Rich Romans celebrated their dies natalis, or birthday, with food and drink, the exchanging of gifts, and making offerings to their personal gods. You see, each person had a tutelary deity, or guardian spirit. For men, this personal protective spirit was called a genius, and for women it was called a Juno. On the birthday of these elite Roman men and women, mostly men, they would honor their genius, or their Juno, aka their guardian spirits, with prayers, poetry, and even animal sacrifices at times. As I was reading about this, I thought, this sounds a lot like the patron saints of Catholicism, right? So I checked to see if there was any connection, and sure enough, this Roman concept of a personal protective patron helped shape how patron saints later functioned in the Roman Catholic Church. That blew my mind. And similar to how the Greeks offered cakes to the moon goddess, these Roman birthday celebrations included making cakes too, for either the birthday boy or girl as part of the feast, or as an offering to their personal guardian spirit. It's important to distinguish between the ancient Greek and Roman cakes and the birthday cakes we make today, though. They weren't the same kind of cake. The ritual cakes of ancient Greece and ancient Rome were flatter, more like sweetbread or cheesecakes, sweetened with honey. A few examples from Roman culinary texts include a small honey cake made with flour and cheese called libum, a dessert-like baked cheesecake called sovillum, and a layered pastry called placenta. Yes, placenta. The 16th century Italian anatomist, Realdo Colombo, named the organ placenta because of its flat, round, disc-like shape resembling this specific type of cake. Who would have guessed that the placenta was named after the earliest birthday cakes? Wild. Since birthdays were reserved for gods in the beginning, and they spread to people of high social status, it would seem that birthdays were on their way to becoming something that was celebrated by common folks, right? But we still have a ways to go, like 1,500 more years to go before that happens. Why did it take so long? To answer that, we have to talk about the perception of birthdays by Judeans and early Christians. Did you know that the Hebrew Bible mentions birthdays only one time? It's in Genesis 40:20, and it has to do with the Pharaoh's birthday, not an Israelite. We don't have clear evidence that the Jewish people of antiquity celebrated birthdays, possibly because birthdays were associated with pagan rulers, like the one verse in Genesis. If they did celebrate their own birthdays, it doesn't seem to have been widespread, as there is no data to support that practice. The rabbinic tradition focused, instead, on other milestones like circumcision and bar mitzvahs. Early Christians inherited their views about birthdays from the Jews, seeing them as a pagan ritual as well. The New Testament, too, mentions birthday celebrations only once. Well, technically it's twice, but it's the same story recorded once in Matthew and again in Mark. It's the story about King Herod's birthday banquet, where his new wife's daughter dances for him and he tells her that he will give her anything she asks for, up to half of his kingdom. But having been coached by her mother, Herod's wife, she knew to ask for the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Yikes. There's more to that story, but we don't have to get sidetracked by it. The point is that birthdays were for kings and rulers, and they were seen as a pagan tradition to early Christians, so they rejected the practice at first. Instead, they celebrated baptismal anniversaries, and eventually, the birth of Jesus. Jesus' birth became the first major birthday celebrated widely in Christianity. Once again, this was reserved for very important figures, and there's no one more important to Christians than Christ, of course. Celebrating your own birthday would seem sacrilegious, putting yourself on the same level as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. It was unheard of. Christians also developed their own theological interpretations of the concept of birthdays by celebrating martyrs' deaths as their heavenly birthday, or their birth into heaven. They would later do the same with saints, celebrating them on the date of their death. We learned about this in our episode on the ancient origins of Christmas. St. Nicholas Day was celebrated not on the anniversary of his birth, but on the anniversary of his death, remember? That was a fun episode. Anyway, back to the timeline. When Christianity became the dominant religion of the Roman Empire, they created a liturgical calendar which included Christmas, of course, but also other sacred births, like the Nativity of John the Baptist and the Nativity of Mary. It's so interesting to me how birthday traditions evolved and got reframed, yet basically stayed the same, for a really long time. Gods and godlike people got birthdays, but not ordinary folks. The customs surrounding birthdays would remain the same through most of the Middle Ages, with the exception of something called name days. In medieval Christian Europe, people started celebrating their name day in a birthday-like way. A name day is the feast day of the saint after whom someone is named. If your name was Nicholas, you'd celebrate yourself along with the festivities of St. Nicholas Day. After all, the saint after whom you were named was your patron saint, or your personal spiritual protector. This is what I was talking about earlier, how the Roman genius and Juno influenced how saints in Catholicism would later function. So, instead of having personal birthdays each year, Christians in medieval Europe had name days. We're getting a little closer to regular birthdays for regular folks, but we're not quite there yet. Aside from the emergence of name days, through the Middle Ages, birthdays continued to be celebrated only by people in power, like kings and nobles, following the Roman aristocratic tradition. Cakes during this stretch of time didn't progress toward the birthday cake traditions of today. They were mostly associated with weddings, religious festivals, or seasonal holidays, and still did not resemble the birthday cake of our time. Alright, I'm going to take a quick break right here, and when I come back, we'll step out of the medieval era to discover the modern origin of birthdays. Don't go anywhere. This episode is brought to you by nothing. To keep ads off this show, click the Patreon link in the show notes to donate, or go to patreon.com/ontheoriginofelverything. Another way you can support this show is by giving it a 5-star rating and review, or by following it, or sharing it. Let's build a community of people that are curious and always learning. Now, back to the show. I mentioned before that calendars make anniversaries possible, and birth registrations allow for birthdays to be scalable beyond the elites. Widespread birthday celebration depends on societies consistently knowing and recording dates of birth. Before modern civil registration, which is defined as continuous, permanent, compulsory, and universal, records were often managed locally, typically by religious institutions, recording births, baptisms, marriages, and deaths. Many societies had some form of population listing, but they weren't perfect. In fact, global registration of all births is still a problem today. We have actually never really had a perfect system that accounts for every person that is born. But by the 18th century, many states had moved toward broad birth registration, and that's where we find ourselves on the timeline. In the late 18th century and early 19th century in German-speaking Europe, something called Kinderfeste emerged. It translates to children's festivals or children's parties. They were literally birthday parties for kids, complete with cake, presents, and candles, one for each year of life, plus one more for good luck for the coming year. So that last bit is different from what I'm used to, but everything else is there. How did this suddenly appear? Pretty much fully assembled. Well, from what I've already covered, the tradition of cakes and candles had been around for centuries, and in our Christmas episodes I explained that gift-giving has been a part of special celebrations for pretty much all of human history. But the curious part about Kinderfeste is the Kinder part of it. Why did Germans decide to suddenly start celebrating the birthdays of their kids? Well, no single person or organization was responsible for this new tradition. Instead, it was a cultural development where the general perception about the individual began to be seen as more important, and childhood began to be revered as a special stage of life. With the rise of individualism ideas, the increased regard for childhood, and drawing from existing cake, candles, and gift-giving traditions, they created birthday parties, or Kinderfeste, for their kids. This tradition eventually spread through Europe and became the foundation of the modern birthday party. So, we have established the origin of the birthday party, but what about the origin of the modern birthday cake? Because sugar was expensive and oven technology was still improving, it wouldn't be until the 19th century that the modern birthday cake started to take shape. Industrialization caused sugar prices to drop, and for the first time in history, sugar was accessible across all classes. Industrialization also ushered in better ovens and molds, and, along with the introduction of baking powder, fluffy, dessert-like cakes made in-home became more common. It really wasn't until the 20th century that the birthday cake we recognize as a layered, iced, spongy dessert became the standard. What about the tradition of making a wish and blowing out the candles in one breath? It's a birthday staple now, but when you try to trace it back to ancient times, you keep hitting dead ends. The Greek cake offerings to Artemis may have had lit candles on them, but we're not 100% sure, And there's a lot of discourse out there about the symbolism of the smoke of the blown candles carrying the wish up to heaven, but that's all retroactive interpretation. We haven't found any direct evidence of candles on cakes or the practice of blowing them out before the German-speaking Europeans were doing it in the 18th century, which was around the same time that Kinderfeste started. Candles on cakes could have existed prior to that, or they could have originated with those Germans. We can't say for sure either way. What we can be certain about, though, is the origin of the Happy Birthday song. It was originally a kindergarten welcome song called Good Morning to All. It was written in 1893 by two sisters in Louisville, Kentucky. An early childhood educator, Patty Smith Hill, and composer, Mildred J. Hill, co-wrote and copyrighted this little tune that went, "Good morning to you, good morning to you, good morning, dear children, good morning to all." It's unclear how or when these lyrics morphed into the Happy Birthday lyrics that we all know, but by 1912, the combination of the melody with birthday lyrics appeared in print. And the U.S. Copyright Office shows that the Clayton F. Summy Company published and copyrighted an arrangement pairing the melody with the birthday lyrics in 1935, by which point Happy Birthday to You had become the official birthday song. And that wraps up the origin story of birthdays. I had a lot of fun learning about all this, but in the back of my mind, I kept thinking that this episode could have just been 2 sentences long. Birthdays originated in 18th century Germany with Kinderfeste, and the birthday song was an adaptation of a kindergarten song from 1893 in Kentucky. But that doesn't really tell the whole story now, does it? We got to learn all about guardian spirits and name days, the history of cake, and so much other cool stuff. I hope you learned as much as I did with this one. Before I go, I have a few birthday shout-outs. Turns out there are a lot of people in my life that have birthdays this time of year. Happy birthday to Elise, Katie, Sammy, Justin and Jordan, Rick, Olga, Jude, and London. I hope you guys get a proper cake with the corresponding number of candles, and that your birthday wish comes true as you blow the candles out with one breath and one breath only after everyone has sung Happy Birthday to you. Hopefully in tune. Too often the singing sounds more like a sad funeral song than a cheerful chorus, don't you think? Well, that's all for today. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you back here in a couple of weeks for another random topic. Until next time, so long. Research, music, and production was all done by Jezere Wilson. This podcast is listener-supported, owned and operated by Jez and myself, under the On the Origin of Everything LLC in the United States. All rights reserved. We can be reached via email at info@ontheoriginpod.com.